Okay. Hello, everyone. Peter Charleston here to talk to you in the next half an hour about relationships and particularly about my book Closer that's just come out and why I wrote it and what I think is the state of relationships in our society today and why I think there's a problem. So let's get going and let's see what we can uncover. Feel free as we go along to write me something in the chat box or ask a question and I will endeavour to answer it. I do have a bit of content to get through in half an hour, but we'll see how much we can cover. Leo Baselga, who was in the 70s and 80s one of the most popular people to write about love and relationships. He says to live in love is life's greatest challenge. It requires more subtlety, flexibility, sensitivity, understanding, acceptance, tolerance, knowledge, and strength than any other human endeavour or emotion. Now, given that, I think that reflects just how difficult it is to not just fall in love, but to sustain love for any length of time. So one of the questions I'm posing to you tonight is, are you a good lover? And I'm not just talking about physical, I'm talking about love that goes to a much deeper level in terms of the ability for you to connect well emotionally with a partner and nurture that for it to grow in the long term. So what I'm getting at here already is that love is a set of skills you can learn and with practice improve. So part of the reason why I wrote this book is to redefine what love is. And to me, it's about action. It's not just about words. And I'll explain that as we go along. Another person you might know is Ricky Gervais, who was once asked in an interview if there was a universal truth that underpinned his writing. And his answer was quite simple, really. It was probably that everyone needs love. So given that, I also agree with Ricky that we're all seeking something. We all have similar emotional needs. It's just that most of us find it really hard to express what these needs are or to even identify them. So part of the reason why I've written my book is to try to make it more easy for us to identify what our needs are, express them to others, and have them met. Part of the problem, I think, though, in today's society, I'm an idealist. So I thought this current generation of people who are dating in their 20s and 30s and so, I thought they'd be better than Generation X. They'd be better than Generation Baby Boomer at dating and relationships. But it seems that they've just got a whole new set of problems than people in the past. So a lot of the conversations I've had, particularly with people in their 20s lately, are things like this. One person says, young people go out in packs. It's really hard to meet anyone new. Another one says, I'm constantly checking social media to see if people are talking about me. Another person says, I have 600 friends on Facebook, but I'm only in regular contact with 3 of them. Another person says, when I'm out, I would not dare venture away from my friends in order to meet someone new. So it seems that we rely more and more on online dating apps, for instance, to make connections with people rather than face-to-face in the real world. And I think there's a bit of a problem with that. Well, there are several problems with that. There are 8,000 dating sites in the world, apparently, right now. There are 50 million swipes per day in Australia on Tinder alone. So that means there's a lot of swiping going on. And it seems like apps like Tinder have made searching for a mate a real game. Problem with that is it takes the seriousness out of finding a relationship. So people are more likely to act more immaturely when it's a game, more like boys and girls rather than men and women. Apparently, at least a third of people on Tinder don't actually date. So they just use it as a game, which to me is a bit of a problem, especially when there are actually people on there who are trying to find a partner. 8 out of 10 people, according to another survey, say that they use phones in social settings frequently or occasionally, which hurts the conversation. So have a think about how often you use your phone, especially in a social setting, and whether that actually gets in the way of social opportunities. 89% of phone users use their phone at social gatherings they attend. So we definitely miss opportunities when we're distracted and too busy with something else. We're not actually in the moment. It's only when we're in the moment that we notice people and maybe have some connection with them, some conversation with them. So what happens then when two people meet? What are they attracted by? The way people meet and form relationships, I don't think sometimes it sets them up well to sustain a relationship, or at least a healthy one. For example, a couple of examples here. Oh, she looked really hot, so I went up and talked to her, and then we started dating. Another person, he seemed really confident and strong, and that's what I wanted in a man. Another person says, well, we had a similar intellect. We talked about philosophy all night, or we talked about history all night. And that got us going. Well, another person says, well, we both had a real passion for V8 supercars, so we really hit it off strongly at the start. And last person who says, wow, we just love to party, and at the start of our relationship, we really partied hard with each other and we had a lot of fun. Now, none of these are actually wrong, but surely there's a better way of choosing a long-term partner. None of these ways people initially meet actually predict long-term compatibility. Because as time passes, the hotness kind of fades. The V8 supercars aren't quite enough to hold a conversation going at the dinner table. And over time, if there's not enough to connect both people, they distance themselves both physically and emotionally. And as resentment builds, conflict increases, the relationship's usually headed to fall apart. And as we know, 40% of marriages end up separating. And I wonder just how many more who are still in a relationship or a marriage are unhappy and unhealthy. For some reason, they don't know how to connect well, particularly on an emotional level, even if they might have similar interests to each other. And I think part of the problem is that the expectations we set up of a partner sometimes are just so high, it's quite amazing that they'll ever get met. So here are my top 3. And I phrase it as, if you really love me, you would. First one, be able to read my mind. So if you really love me, you should know what I want, and you should be able to satisfy my needs without me explaining it to you. Why should I have to explain it to you? If you love me, you would know. Quite unreasonable, quite unrealistic. Number 2, if you love me, you would make me happy. Why aren't I happy? Number 3, if you love me, you would fix all my troubles. Now, looking at those 3, you probably think, yeah, they are very irrational, quite unreasonable. But let's take a look. Most people have at least one in their heads that they often blame the partner for if it's not satisfied. Notice just how high expectations we have of our partners. I think part of the problem is that we're looking for the perfect person. And when we fall in love with someone, We might actually have a fantasy that they are perfect. Problem is, at some point we're going to get to know them. And if the real person isn't perfect, we might be put off. So I think part of the skill or the art of forming a good relationship is actually accepting each other's imperfections and not looking for something that's unrealistic. Because when we have high expectations, they tend to turn into demands and control behaviors, and this does not help relationships. Think also of just how many people might feel lonely, whether they're in a relationship or not in a relationship. That lack of connection with someone can really do damage. Apparently, 1 in 4 Australian homes is a one-person household. Now, that doesn't mean that every person who lives on their own is lonely, and not everyone needs a relationship. All I'm emphasizing here is that you do need rich social networks in order to thrive and be happy. And for that, you need good interpersonal skills. A couple of other bits of research. We know that healthy social connections actually influence our longevity. We know there's now an association being made between loneliness and heart disease and stroke. And we know that social connections, good social connections, predict mortality more than diet and exercise do. But I don't think we're spending enough time and energy on our social connections. We actually tend to spend far more time and energy on our diet and exercise in general. Maybe fairy tales are to blame for these high expectations we have of each other. Cinderella met her prince, they lived happily ever after. Why can't that happen to me? Well, in real life, it's a little bit more difficult. And if I had a chance, I'd probably write the Cinderella sequel, Cinderella 2, where reality hits and they have to work on things together. So, my first tip is that you need to create a strong relationship ethic. It's a bit like a work ethic. If you have a strong work ethic, then you're going to get things done at work, you're going to perform well, your career is going to take off. It's the same at home and in relationships. When you prioritize time with your partner and making it real quality time where you actually get to communicate on a deeper level with each other rather than just do things together, where you actually prioritize time with each other regularly. Even the small things you do together can help you connect with each other. If you feel like you're working as a team on something, it makes the task a lot easier to accomplish. So I think most of us need a better relationship ethic. We tend to, at least in long-term relationships, we tend to spend less time on the relationship because we assume it's going okay, or we kind of assume that we know each other well and there's nothing more to say, or we give up on romance, or we give up on maintaining that connection we had at the start. And I think that's a real pity. So if you gave yourself more time to connect with each other, would you be willing to sacrifice something? So this taps into the perfection again, that if you're going to give more time to a relationship, something needs to give. So would you be willing to earn less money to be happy? Think about that. Would you be willing to achieve less to cultivate better relationships? Because I think there's a lot of people pursuing wealth and success, often at the price of their relationships, and that's a pretty big price to pay. Think about families and how they communicate with each other and how close family members actually are to each other. Think of the technology family use on a regular basis and what would happen if everyone turned off their devices for a night or two. Would we be able to interact, connect with each other on a deep level? Think about working relationships as well in that sense. How well do you know the people you work with? Do you actually engage well with each other at work? Do you communicate well? Do you share, cooperate, and work as a team? These sorts of skills are very similar to the ones used at home. It's just a different context. Think also in the general public, are you friendly to people? For instance, if you're taking a plane flight, do you speak to the person next to you? Or like some people, do you just pretend that they're not even there? It's quite interesting what happens on public transport or on a plane in particular, where we might be on a flight for several hours and yet there's often a lot of silence because people are awkward to talk to strangers. When we are in a relationship, what do you talk about with each other when you're not distracted? When you're in a room together and there's silence? Often people, couples in particular, talk about other people, or they talk about places or things or events. And when they're doing that, they don't necessarily talk about themselves or open up much about how they feel, what they're going through on a deeper level. I don't think we have enough skill in that area. It's easy talking about other people or places you want to go, things you want to do with each other, but are you actually opening up about yourself and interested in the other person on a deeper level as well? Why is this sort of communication so important? Well, both men and women, this is one survey of 39,000 people, are far more sexually satisfied when they communicate better in general, as well as cuddle, kiss, and laugh together. But it's the communication that happens on a daily, regular basis with each other that creates the connection that then transfers well in terms of physical intimacy. So, what is love? It means many things to many people, but to me, like I said earlier, it's about action, and it's about what people communicate with each other that connects them and makes a relationship special, that creates love. So surely we can come up with a definition of love that's actually usable rather than one that's just maybe philosophical or sounds good. Because we know through research that people with rich interpersonal networks actually recover more quickly from disease, they live longer, and who we're with has such a profound effect on us. And science is just beginning to understand just how much of an impact a long-term relationship can have on us. Like I say on this slide about mirror neurons that actually track the emotional flow of one person to the other. So when you're talking with me and sharing your emotions with me, it actually has a physical impact on my brain. Here's what I mean by deeper connection. And if you can answer these three in the positive, you're in a relationship at the moment, I think that your relationship is probably going pretty well. Can I truly be myself with this person? I think that's a really important question to ask. Are we really compatible apart from the surface stuff? And will we both support each other to pursue our dreams? I think all three questions are really important to ask. Yet they don't really get asked much at the start of a relationship. Part of the problem also, I think, is that we have such strong habits from our previous relationships and from our upbringing that we often don't realize that we keep repeating bad habits in our current relationships. Surely there's a new way of relating that we can learn, that we can change our programming. Here's David Schnarch's version. He's an expert on marriage and relationship counseling. He wrote a book called Passionate Marriage a number of years ago. He says, intimacy is about 3 confrontations: confronting the reality of the relationship, confronting the reality of who the other person is, and confronting the reality of who you are. These things are quite difficult at first, but it's if you can confront the reality of things, you can make such a deeper connection with each other. I'll explain that a bit further as I go along. So what I'm getting at here is, and this, I guess this is the biggest cliche you'll ever hear in your life, but we know intuitively that in order to love someone well, you need to love yourself first. And a lot of authors in psychology and self-help and spirituality have repeated that sort of statement again and again in different ways. But what does loving yourself mean? I don't think we have a practical way of learning how to do that. And this is what I've tried to explain in my book, to give you a practical, easy to learn way of having a better relationship with yourself. So once you have a better relationship with yourself, you also need the skills of how to love others well and how to receive their love back in a good way too. Again, this might also involve changing your habits, learning some new skills. And again, I think this is possible if you're willing to learn. So what we know is the quality of your life is actually reflected in the quality of your relationships, which is why I suggest to people that they spend a bit more time learning their interpersonal skills, but also learning how to have a better relationship with themselves. What you need to do to achieve that is confront yourself and be vulnerable. And here's my book. And pretty much what I've been talking about so far tonight is what my book's about. It highlights how to love yourself in a practical way, and also the skills you need to love others better and receive love better. So let me explain what the 7 principles are within the book. They all start with A, and they're all emotional needs that I explain within the book. Think about this. Think about me giving you these things first up. I notice you. I care about you. I hear your needs and feelings. I apologize for my mistakes. I value your uniqueness. I'm proud of you. I believe in you. And thanks for what you give to me back. Just notice how powerful that is if I gave you those things on a regular basis, and how you'd feel as a result. This is my version, or my definition, of love in action. When you give someone each of these 7 things, that's what they receive. And when it's reciprocal, you create a really strong emotional connection with each other. So what these 7 principles are they are emotional needs that everyone seeks to satisfy. So what I'm arguing is that these 7 things pretty much underlie all the conversations we have with loved ones. They also underlie all the arguments we ever have. So even arguments about, for instance, the towel I left on the floor this morning before I went to work, and I do this regularly, unfortunately, and I do apologize for it, but you come into the bathroom and you see the towel again and you're so frustrated, and when we come home tonight, we're going to have another argument about. Now, even arguments like the towel on the floor are about emotional needs that underlie everything. So this example, for instance, it's not just about the towel, although I do need to learn to pick it up and put it on the rack. It shouldn't be that hard. It's also about me appreciating you for what you do, and me showing a little more consideration for you because you need to use that space too. So if we can tap into the emotional need within that argument, then we might be much better at having more constructive arguments that resolve something. If I know what your emotional needs are and you know what my emotional needs are, we're halfway there. to getting them satisfied. So that's what I mean by the 7 principles. They're universal emotional needs that everyone has. They're also emotional skills that you can learn and practice and improve. You can learn to attend better to other people. You can learn to be more affectionate. You can learn to be more accepting, etc., etc. The third thing these 7 principles are obviously they're gifts that you can give to other people and ones that you can receive from others as well. With the receiving bit, I think sometimes we just don't even notice that other people are giving us a version of love, and we don't appreciate it enough or use it enough or hear it well enough. So that's an actual skill to learn how to receive love well. Because part of what gets in the way sometimes for people, if you don't have a good relationship with yourself, you won't deserve to be loved well by someone else. So you'll actually block it. That's an important thing to get right. You can learn to unblock those things. I call it self-sabotage in the book. You can learn to not self-sabotage and to learn to give and receive love much better. So I hope that makes sense to you. Let me know if there's any questions or comments, because we're running out of time already. But that's pretty much what the book's about. I have a chapter devoted to each of the 7 principles where I explain in detail what I've just summarized for you there. So what you might gain from this is a much better understanding of yourself and other people in an emotional sense, in terms of what your emotional needs are from each other. That will improve how you communicate emotionally with other people, and you'll become more skilled at satisfying others' emotional needs as well. In other words, you learn how to have a deeper connection with people, more satisfying relationships, drastically reducing conflict and healing the emotional pain from the past, which obviously also enhances physical intimacy as well. And that's the stuff that sustains relationships in the long term. So you end up, when you're skilled at these things, satisfying your own emotional needs, giving well to others, and receiving love from others. So your whole energy becomes a lot more positive in your life. This is where happiness you start to feel as much as feeling love. And as a result, you can much more likely reach your potential with this in your life. That's how important I think these sorts of relationships are. Whether it's with a partner, a best friend, a family member, or even a colleague or a business partner, these relationships are really important. So that's what Closer provides. I hope you can take a look. It's available in all bookstores at the moment and from Booktopia as well online. So I hope you've got something out of today's talk too. Just lastly, I also have an online program under the Mental Strength website. And in the next couple of weeks, I will be taking module 6. Each of the 5 modules are available online from last year. And this year I'll be focusing more on personal relationships. So module 6, I haven't quite set the dates yet, but I will give you some invites in a few weeks' time. I've already got 14 different webinars within this module, and it runs through all the major areas of dating and relationships. So the first few are about dating and the differences between men and women, etc., all the way down to some of the issues people have in their relationships. So how to deal with a lazy partner, exploring intimacy, managing children, dealing with wider family politics, dealing with money issues, etc., etc. So there's heaps of content in these webinars. Hope you can join in sometime. And as I said, I'll send you an invite soon. So I better stop there. That's Closer. and I hope you can get a copy sometime. And thanks for listening in today. Any questions or comments? I'll hang around for another couple of minutes. Otherwise, I'll let you go. Well, looks like I've explained it clearly enough tonight. That's good. Good, thank you. I hope you got something out of this webinar. I'll probably be putting this up on YouTube, so if you can share it with anyone, that'd be fantastic. And I'll hope to see you soon. Let's end it for there. Have a good night. Bye for now.